Hello, everyone. We will be starting the webinar in a couple of minutes. So as of now, we see there are attendees
Hello.
joining in. Yes, I think we have Dr. Jamie Miller with us. We also have people from Anant National University. A couple of minutes, and I think we would be good to start this session. We'll give the joinees a couple of minutes. I do see people joining in. We have a good number of attendants for now to at least begin the session. As people join in, I'll keep on posting the links of, in the chat box for them to know our pages and get to know us better. And what they have missed as an introductory session, they'll also find that on our web pages. So I welcome you, Dr. Jamie Miller. I welcome the people from Anant National University, the fellowship team. Uh, we are conducting this webinar today to take you through the two aspects. One is the Anand Fellowship, which is a way forward to finding the solutionaries. A one-year postgraduate diploma program, which lets you develop a comprehensive understanding of the built environment. It's a multidisciplinary and an interdisciplinary curriculum where you have classroom lectures as well as hands-on projects, and it exposes you to different environments of live action projects, workshops, studios, and likewise. So that's one part of it. And the second part of it is how biomimicry and sustainability are the way forward. So we have with us Dr. Jamie Miller, who is the global director and founder of Biomimicry Frontiers and B Plus Architects. He'll take us through how the nature has the solution for most of our problems with its research of 3.8 billion years. So a quick video to introduce you all to what the fellowship at Anant University is about. And then I'll hand over the stage to Dr. Miller to take us through the nature's way of leading life. I will quickly share my screen.
Life could begin and flourish on Earth because of its Goldilocks environment, balanced and perfect to support and sustain life. For millions of years, a complex web of organic and inorganic systems evolved, delicately balanced, supporting life and keeping our planet habitable. In the last few centuries, human interventions in the environment, a rapid rise of man-made structures in nature, unsustainable planning of our habitats and workplaces have resulted in severe damage to the ecosystem. Life and health of all species are threatened. Viability of air, soil, and water is suspect. We need solutionaries, revolutionary thinkers to learn together, work together, and solve the problems of our built environment together, and thus create a world that is sustainable, healthy, and happy to live in. Join us at Anant Fellowship.
Thank you so much, everyone, for patiently watching the video. I'll be posting the link of Anant Fellowship in the chat box for you to, know more about how we are in the process of giving solutionaries to the future world. Over to Dr. Jamie Miller from here to take us through the nature's way of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Excellent. Thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks for joining everyone who's here. It's a pleasure to talk about this. Today, I want to talk about biomimicry in three ways. I want to talk about the shift that's taking place in our societies, in our planet. I want to talk about the shift that's happening in biomimicry. And I want to frame this all based on how biomimicry has shifted my perspective and led me to the course and the vocation and the work that I do. So despite being a natural species, despite being natural, humans are very distinct. And we're distinct in how we deal with complexity and how we think and create assumptions for how to deal with this complexity. And what's interesting is that we've kind of diverged from the rest of the natural world in how we do things. And we've created problems for ourselves, which are called wicked problems in resilience literature. They're wicked because they have no precedent for how to solve them, which means that the thinking that was used to create the problems will not help us solve those problems. We need bold new thinking. We need thinking from a new perception, a new perspective, and from new assumptions. And I think this is why biomimicry is so valuable, is because it gives us an opportunity to think from a new lens. I love this quote that says, "Innovation is seeing what everybody else has seen and thinking what nobody else has thought." This is, again, what biomimicry is all about. Because when I look at this forest now, 20 years ago, I would have said, I see some trees, some brush, a pathway, some roots. But through a biomimetic lens, what I see now are ancient elders who have long lasted climate change. I see genius towers that are moving fluids vertically upwards without electricity or mechanical devices. I see these towers making solar panels in the form of leaves, solar collectors, and making these solar collectors using water-based chemistry, using only a subset of the periodic table of elements, using body temperature and body pressure, and making them fully recyclable. So in this image, I also see a circular economy. There's no waste in this image. I also see trees that are communicating with each other through their root systems, through fungal mycelium networks, telling each other about potential pests or invasions, sharing information and resources. Imagine our towers, our buildings could share information like this. I see dynamic facades. I see walls that can breathe and shed and expand. So through a biomimetic lens, when I look at this image, I don't see just nature. I see a time-tested genius for how to thrive on this planet. So if you get nothing else from today, I hope you get this one thing, that biomimicry is fundamentally about shifting our perception. It's about looking at the built and natural environments in new ways, recognizing that nature's been thriving on this planet for billions of years. And as a very young species, humans have only just arrived, and we could learn from that genius. So my perception shifted in my undergraduate in engineering. It was at the time I was under this impression that there had to be a different way of doing engineering, that what I was being taught was not the only way, and that there had to be a different way of thinking. So I took this elective called math and poetry, and it was an hour and a half of math and an hour and a half of poetry. And in the math section, we're unpacking math theorems. And the professors were brilliant in having us believe like we were coming up with these theorems ourselves. And this theorem is the one that really caught my attention. You may recognize this, but this is the Fibonacci sequence. And it's a sequence of numbers that when you add the first two numbers, you get the third number. So starting with 0 and 1, you get 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and so on. The professor had us then start to explore these in geometry. It's like, what if we had a 1 by 1 box and we put another 1 by 1 box beside it? Well, you'd actually get a 2 by 2 box fit in there. And then you could get that 3 by 3 box to fit in there, and then the 5 by 5 box to fit in there. And so he had us play with these geometries and come up with this beautiful rectangle, which is called the golden ratio. And then he said, well, what if we connected the corners? All of a sudden, we got this beautiful spiral called the Fibonacci spiral. And then this is where kind of the penny dropped. And he said, all right, where have we seen this before? And all of a sudden, we started to realize that the Fibonacci sequence is everywhere. It's ubiquitous in nature. It's in the packaging of sunflower seeds. It's in pine cones. It's in the way that the vortex created when you pull the plug from your bathtub. It's in the way that the Big Bang, the universe is expanding from the Big Bang. It's in our skin pores. It's in our ears. That Fibonacci spiral is ubiquitous in the natural world. And for some reason, this kind of triggered something for me. Up until that point, I had been learning to use math and science to engineer my environment. And this shifted my whole perception to help me realize that through math, I can learn about our environment, that nature could teach us how to do design in very clever ways. So this was the impetus of my journey. And this was back in 2004. And I have been unable to do anything other than seek nature's genius. This is what I feel like I'm here to do. And so after that course, I read a book called Cat's Paws and Catapults, which unpacked all of those questions that you had as a 5-year-old. You know, how can cats jump so high? How do ants carry so much load? They talk about the engineering of nature. And then from there, I found a book called Biomimicry, Innovation That's Inspired by Nature. It was written by Janine Benyus. And I found Janine and went and did a workshop with her in Costa Rica. And that's where she started to teach me about the deeper principles and practice of biomimicry and how to do it. And she helped me realize that we could learn how to create color from nature. Peacocks don't use pigments. They don't use toxic chemicals to create their beautiful iridescence. They use structural color. We could learn from nature to create adhesives, to create materials, packaging, complex structures, and whole ecosystems, learning from nature how to create, circular economies or resilient infrastructure in communities. She taught me that biomimicry, by definition, innovation that's inspired by nature, and that the most classic example is Velcro. Velcro was inspired in the 1940s by burrs that stuck to a hiker's pants as he was hiking through the Swiss mountains. There was a Swiss engineer named George de Maestro, and he took his frustration, the frustration of these burrs sticking to his pants and to his dog's hair, and he turned that frustration into fascination. And he copied that hooking mechanism called barbules and just directly copied that shape to make one of the most successful adhesives of our time. Another good example is whale power, which was originally based out of Toronto. Here, a biologist was kind of confused why there were bumps on the front edge of a humpback whale fin. And he started to question why that was there. Because if you think of aerodynamics, often you'll think of that smooth front edge, like airplane wings or in automobiles. So he took this and started to explore what if these bumps could be applied somewhere else? Maybe there's something to these bumps. He applied them to a wind turbine blade and found that that blade was 20% more efficient, ran at slower wind speeds, and was quieter than traditional blades. And what I love about this example is that it shows that nature's been refining designs over billions of years to make things more efficient, more effective. And that when we use a biomimetic lens, we may too learn from this genius to make better designs ourselves. Another classic example is the Eastgate building in Harare, Zimbabwe. Here, the architect Mick Pierce was challenged with building a building without air conditioning. And he looked to the natural world for design advice. And one of the key advisors really was termites. Termites have these beautiful mounds that stick way up above the ground. And what he found is that despite the ambient temperature fluctuating from 2 degrees at night to 40 degrees Celsius in the heat of the day, the termite mound actually maintained a constant temperature of 32 degrees Celsius all the time. So despite this gradient, this fluctuation happening outside, that mound was able to maintain constant temperature without electricity. He learned that they did it through this complex tunnel network and this gas exchange, all through kind of fluid dynamics. So Mick kind of took this as inspiration and incorporated it into his own design, into this Eastgate building. And what he found is that this building used 10% of the energy of a traditional building of that size in that environment. And they saved $3.5 million in air conditioning costs in the first 5 years. Another cool example is Ornilux. So as we build more glass towers, as our cities become more dense and more intense, bird collisions is a massive problem. There are millions of birds that die every year from hitting buildings, specifically glass buildings. So Ornilux went to the natural world to find an example for how to solve this problem. What they found is that spider silk reflects ultraviolet light, which is great because birds can see ultraviolet light. So as they're flying through the forest, they can avoid the webs because it'd be annoying for both species, both the spider and the bird, to just fly through a web. Ornilux took this inspiration and applied it to these windows. And what was great is that they put this film on these windows. And what's great is that humans can't see ultraviolet light. So the film that's put on doesn't impact our vision. It doesn't impact our view, but birds can see these striations, these netting. And they found that these Ornilux windows reduced bird collisions by 70%. And one of my favorite examples is the lily impeller, designed by Jay Harmon. Jay too was fascinated with that Fibonacci spiral as he was walking along the beach in Australia, where he was originally from. He saw a broken seashell, and he looked at that seashell and realized that there's this beautiful spiral. And he started to realize that nature moves with the fluid, with the flow of its environment. If you think of kelp, as waves crash over kelp don't try to resist that. They actually spiral because fluids naturally want to spiral, naturally want a vortex. So he thought, what if we applied this to an impeller? Okay, just a second, bud. So this impeller, which copies that spiral, can move 10 million gallons of fluid with the electricity of just 2 light bulbs. And it's because it moves with the natural flow of fluids. There are countless examples of biomimicry designs that are emerging. There's interface carpets copied the forest floor. Sorry, I'm also on dad duty here. Velcro, as you see, there's cranium is a helmet that copied woodpeckers to make a helmet that reduces concussions. If you think of a woodpecker, it's smashing its face against a hard object and doesn't get a concussion. And in North America, at least, there's a huge rise of concussions in hockey and football. And so what Cranium has realized is they studied the woodpecker and found that there's a couple key innovations. One, the woodpecker uses its bottom jaw to hit the wood. And the bottom jaw isn't connected to the skull, so it doesn't shake and rattle the brain. The other cool thing is that the tongue actually wraps around the brain like a seatbelt and holds the brain in place. And that was the technology that Cranium copied. There's architecture that copied the durian fruit. There's hoses that copy snake skin. There's a water collection technology that copies the Namibian beetle. And the Namibian beetle is beautiful because it lives in the Namib desert where there's not a lot of moisture, not a lot of water. And they have this really clever technology where they'll go up on the dunes in the morning when the moisture levels is highest in the environment, and they'll stick their wings out. And these wings have hydrophobic and hydrophilic kind of bumps. The hydrophilic bumps actually attract that moisture from the air and start to collect it, and it'll start to ball up. And then the hydrophobic tunnels direct that water into the critter's mouth. And so there's fog nets that copy this technology and capture moisture from the air, capture rain from the air. What's amazing about biomimicry is that we're at a time where we have technologies that can make some of these crazy ideas real. So walls that breathe like skin, or walls that sweat, buildings that communicate with each other like mycelium. This is all made possible by the emerging technologies that exist: additive manufacturing, Internet of Things, big data, 3D and 4D printing, computational architecture, green chemistry. The things that we're creating in science are perfectly matching with the incredible ideas that we can take from nature, the metaphors that we can learn from nature. So the exciting thing is when I work with students, I push them to come up with the most bold, creative ideas possible, because I believe that anything is possible now with technology. And what's amazing is that my students at OCAD University back in 2012, they came up with ideas like, one, for example, was what if we could collect the wind from highways by making this impeller wind turbine? This is in 2012, and I just saw that this year, there's a technology that exists. My student didn't follow through, but there's a technology that copied that exact idea and is now worth a couple $1 million. Their valuation is I was thinking about $11 million US. So any bold ideas that you can come up with, now is the time to make them real. The other amazing thing is that biomimicry is the future. It's the most comprehensive model of sustainability because it steps outside of human exceptionalism. It helps us realize that nature's been on this planet in this context designing for a lot longer than us. And so people are catching up to this and realizing that biomimicry has so much potential. There's research that showed in the next 8 years, there's an expected $1.6 trillion of global output for biomimicry-based innovations. Between 2000 and 2012, biomimicry patents increased by 750%. And we're seeing, Microsoft hired a director of biomimicry, B+H Architects, which is an international company with 500 employees, 9 offices around the world, 9 different countries. They hired me as a director of biomimicry. Some of these big companies are recognizing that biomimicry is the future of design and design thinking. And so we're seeing a huge insurgence and a huge shift in how people assume sustainability and seek sustainable ideas. What's really important is to recognize that biomimicry is not a new idea. It's a new term for a very old idea. And I always want to make this point because we didn't come up with this. This isn't something that's emerging now. It's just Janine provided a term that has galvanized a community. People have been doing biomimicry for thousands of years. These are the sketches of Leonardo da Vinci, who was very interested in biomimicry and innovation inspired by nature. If you've ever been to Barcelona, the Sagrada Familia Church by Antonio Gaudi has lots of biomimicry. He wrote often about how he was using nature as inspiration. And indigenous elders, so the indigenous people to North America, to Canada, or what they call Turtle Island, they've been doing biomimicry for years. If you think of snowshoes, you know, these big webbed feet that we wear on snow, maybe not so common in India, but snowshoes were inspired by Arctic hare feet, and the igloos that they used were inspired by polar bear dens. And there's an indigenous elder that I work with, and when I told her what I did, she said, well, Jamie, we've been doing biomimicry for thousands of years. And I think it's exciting to know that people are starting to realize that we can learn and harness ideas from nature that could teach us as a species how to live long-term on this planet. So after I met Janine and started to explore these ideas, I taught biomimicry at Canada's design university called OCAD. I taught biomimicry for several years, and that's where I learned the methodology. And like I said, I worked with students to come up with some of these bold ideas to see how we could shift the system, how we could shift the way that we do design. And this is where I kind of understood that there's 3 levels of biomimicry application. And this could be helpful for you, people out there that want to apply biomimicry. There's form-based biomimicry, process-based, and systems-based. Form-based is the most basic level. It's I'd say the most shallow level, and it's where you're copying shapes in nature. So that's like the impeller that's shaped like a spiral. Lotusin, they copied lotus leaf, and lotus leaves are really clever because they have these little towers, these microscopic towers that collect the dirt in amongst these towers. And then when water hits it, water is attracted to either a surface or to itself. And if there isn't a large surface area for it to attract to, it'll just ball up. And so because of all these towers, water on a lotus leaf is a perfect sphere. And what's amazing about the lotus leaf is that it'll capture all that dirt, these water droplets will capture the dirt and self-clean it. So a company called Lotusin copied that shape, that form, to make paints that can self-clean, that don't need toxic chemicals to clean. Or you may be familiar with Japan's bullet train that copied the beak of the kingfisher. So this is copying nature's form. It's when you're copying the shape in nature, and it's very sexy and appealing because you can see the direct translation of nature to design. People get it inherently when they can see those 2 worlds. So this is a great place to talk about biomimicry, but it's not the depth that we need to go to be a sustainable species. The next level is process-based biomimicry, and this is where we can start to become more sustainable, is when we copy how nature manufactures. So if you think of spider silk again, spider silk has a strength to weight ratio greater than anything we've ever made before. And what's amazing is that that spider is making that silk, that material, at body temperature and body pressure using water-based chemistry, and it's fully recyclable. In fact, spiders often eat their silk. Nature knows how to manufacture in place. It uses a subset of the periodic table of elements, which makes it so circular. It's easy for nature to decompose into 6 parts and then be put back together. And if you think of how we manufacture, we use high temperatures, high pressures, we use we use the whole periodic table of elements. So it's very hard to decompose these things and then recycle them. That's why circularity is a difficult thing for us, because we don't use that green chemistry. Again, there's like an element of human exceptionalism, this belief that like we need to keep building technologies that are advanced and complicated, when nature solves the same problems that we do with an elegant and a simple set of rules. And that's the beauty of biomimicry, is if we can start to copy this process-based biomimicry. But it also leads to the deepest and most important part of biomimicry, which is systems-based. And that's when we start to emulate the principles of how nature as a system behaves. Things like circularity, things like nature only runs on sunlight, things like nature uses benign manufacturing and benign chemistry, things like nature uses diversity as an element of resiliency, things like nature doesn't build robust structures that resist the environment. In fact, they use information rather than materials. So a tree, for example, is constantly picking up information and making adaptations at multiple scales to adjust to its environment, to always try to fit. It's losing its leaves every fall so that the new leaves that come next spring are more attuned, maybe a different shape, a slightly different shape or a slightly different color to be more effective. These are principles that exist in nature. And now imagine we could take those and apply them to our built environment. Imagine our buildings could constantly adapt and shift. Maybe they shed every year. And the shedding is non-harmful. It's fully biodegradable. And in that shedding, it allows the building to adjust to its environment, to be more attuned. You see, going back to the first thing that I said, humans are interesting because we use certain set of assumptions for how to design in nature. One of those assumptions is that we can resist nature or that we're separate from nature. And we do that because humans use fire. We're the only species that have really used fire, harnessed fire, to make new materials, to re-engineer environments, to essentially separate us from nature. And you can see these assumptions embedded in our designs. You think of the way that we build buildings. They're designed to resist 100-year storm events. They're designed to be robust, strong, to not move, to be predictable, to be stable. And that's fine. I think that's a great, I'm not saying these assumptions are wrong. I'm saying that they might be outdated because now we're seeing climate change and the impact that these buildings are trying to resist, not 100-year storm events anymore, 100-year storm events that happen every 5 years, these intense storms and these intense pressures. And it takes so much energy to resist these things. Maybe we need to be more adaptive like a tree. Maybe we need to use information rather than materials. This is the deepest level of biomimicry. And this is where I like to explore. This is where my work kind of led me. So after teaching at OCAD, like I said, I couldn't do anything other than biomimicry. I worked for the government of Canada for a bit, but I ended up doing a PhD in engineering that focused on systems level biomimicry. And I wanted to explore that idea, what made humans so different? And so I looked at the psychology of design. And I used this model that's on the page here called the adaptive cycle to understand how nature maintains resilience and what we could learn from this model and apply to our built environment so that we could emulate ecological resilience, because we're in a time where resilience is such an important factor. I won't get into details about this. I have a video on YouTube that describes this model. I also describe it in terms of COVID and how COVID teaches us about this model and could be fit in this model. But the key thing about that model is that when we have these big releases and reorganizations like we're having with climate change and COVID-19, these are amazing opportunities for us to adopt a new way of thinking, to adopt biomimicry. So right now is the most opportune time I've seen in my life to take to take biomimicry to a new level, to really push this way of thinking. After my PhD, my dad is a farmer and he's a very practical man. He said, well, Jamie, I want to see what biomimicry is. Enough of this writing, enough of this talking. What does it look like? And this was the inspiration to create my company called Biomimicry Frontiers. We're a consultancy that used biomimicry and applied it to the built environment. And I was specifically interested in architecture and master planning. One of the projects we worked on is with an indoor agricultural company in Canada. They focus specifically on cannabis and medicinal cannabis. And here I knew, because cannabis was legalized in Canada, I knew that there was going to be a huge market for it. And I also knew that the growing this was hugely energy intensive and water intensive. So I wanted to see if I could apply biomimicry to reduce the energy and water needed. The two things that we applied were these impellers in the irrigation system. So we worked with Jay Harmon and the PAX team to 3D print these impellers and help mix the irrigation tanks. We also designed and built a wastewater garden. You know, nature doesn't create waste. So the effluent from the building was all treated by this garden. We also worked with a condo developer in Canada called Tridel, and we implemented these bird-friendly windows. We implemented a biomimicry art piece, and we also implemented technology called Carbon Cure. And it's a concrete manufacturing that sequesters carbon in the process. So usually concrete is a very carbon intense. It emits a lot of carbon in its manufacturing, excuse me. So this copied trees, the way that trees, nature doesn't think carbon's a bad thing. Nature thinks carbon is a building block. It's a fundamental part of building. Carbon's in everything natural. And so this Carbon Cure kind of emulated that structure to make Carbon Cure. So it uses carbon in the process of making the cement. We also designed a house in India, in Bengaluru, where we used biomimicry at multiple levels. We had an incredible client who wanted a very, he was like my students. He wanted to push the envelope, to be bold, and he wanted his house to be as biomimetic as possible. So the first thing we did is we looked at different examples of, well, first of all, we understood what the problem was. And two of the key designs we wanted to achieve is cooling the building passively and also capturing the rainwater during the monsoons and holding that over the drought periods. So we looked at organisms in situ. Like if you want to, as Janine Benya said, if you want to learn how to design for a site, look at the organisms that live on that site because they'll teach you. So we looked at not only organisms in that area, but also organisms around that might help us solve that problem. We looked at baobab trees for how to capture the rain. We looked at barrel cactus for cooling, for also capturing, like the barrel cactus acts like an accordion. It'll expand and contract. But the one that I thought was interesting was elephant skin. And so elephants have these cracks in their skin that capture moisture. It creates a bit of a protective barrier so that as it's walking through the hot sun, the cracks create a bit of a shading. And so the water doesn't evaporate very quickly. And we thought, what if we could apply that to the wall? And so not just apply, we weren't applying elephant skin, but we took that metaphor and said, what if we could create a wall that has those cracks? And we designed this rock wall feature that when it's hooked up to the rain harvesting system, it'll put moisture in all those cracks. And as the sun, kind of goes over the south wall, it'll evaporatively cool and pull the hot air from the building. We also looked at termite mounds and ant hills to make a passive ventilation system. And you can see here through the computational fluid dynamic modeling we did that we're able to achieve passive cooling. So we didn't need HVAC systems. One second.
So for the audience, we have posted some of the links where you can check out the work that Dr. Jamie Miller has been working. We have also shared the YouTube link of the adaptive cycle that he mentioned a couple of minutes back. We have also posted the link of Anant's fellowship where you can register yourself. Yeah, and let's continue with the session.
Thanks, Shadra. The other thing we did with this house is, the thing about biomimicry is it invites us to go beyond this belief that humans are a negative, destructive species. What I find interesting in sustainability conversations is we're always trying to do less harm. Like, how do humans be less harmful on the planet? And I think this is fundamentally kind of misaligned because we are nature. For thousands of years, we were a contribution. Our breath is the breath for trees to stay alive. we emit CO2, which is the air that trees need to breathe. When we go to the washroom, those are the fundamental nutrients that provide wetlands and soils. When we die, our bodies go back to the soil. We are fundamentally a part of nature, and we're a contribution. And so the other thing with this building is we wanted to go beyond this idea of doing less harm, and wanted to explore, what if we could be a contribution? What if our buildings could contribute to their place? And the way that we did this is what we measured. Well, first of all, we designed a very intense permaculture strategy. So all of the plants were working together, using the natural rhythms, the natural interconnections. Nature strives for equilibrium. It doesn't need gardeners. It's fine on its own. And so permaculture is about how to use those natural relationships to make a complex system. But at the same time, it's doing so to also provide food, herbs, medicines on site. So if you haven't heard of permaculture, I'd recommend you go check it out. But we designed a permaculture strategy for the whole building. And this gave us the basis of understanding whether we're being a contribution. So this is what we did. We're able to measure the ecological performance of this site in 3 different scenarios. On the right is the scenario before the design. In the middle is the scenario of our design. And on the left is the scenario as if this area was never developed, if it was just its original forest. And what we measured were things like how much carbon it was sequestering in that scenario, how much water and rainwater it could hold, how much temperature it could regulate, how much oxygen it could produce, how much air it could purify, how much noise it could reduce. We measured all of those metrics in each of these scenarios because we wanted to see if, one, our building was doing better than if our building wasn't there. And we also wanted to measure whether our building could be as effective as a forest. This is how we measured whether we were being a contribution or not. We wanted to see if we were doing better than what was there. So you can see that we measured, and we did see a success. In terms of temperature regulation, we're able to increase by 27% what was happening there before we built. We weren't as good as a forest, but you could see that we were heading in the right direction. And this is the same for air filtration. We saw an increase in how much PM10 we could remove and NOx we could remove. Again, not as good as a forest, but hey, we're doing better than what that site was currently doing. So we're starting to see that we could be a contribution by designing this building on the site. We could contribute to our environments. The last example is I work a lot with master planning, and here we're really trying to push the envelope of how buildings integrate into their environment. This is where I think we could have the biggest impact on climate change, because I know that the most cost-effective way to mitigate climate change is to let nature be. Let nature be complex, let it be diverse, let it do its own thing and stop disrupting it. And so I'm very focused on master planning because there's all of these developments that are just bulldozing forests and starting over. And I want to really try to figure out, how do we integrate the built environment into a forest? Not create a forest city. It's more like, how do we create a city in a forest and we don't disrupt what's already happening? How do we create that harmony? And I'm very passionate about this. So I work a lot with master plans around the world. The thing that I'm interested in is I believe that we could live in a world where 10 billion humans exist with no problem. I imagine we could get to 20 billion. And that might seem shocking to people because people are often thinking about humans in terms of their current way of behaving, which is very consumptive, which is non-natural, which is non-biomimetic, I mean. But if we could apply biomimicry's principles, imagine we built just like nature did. There are more than 10 billion trees on this planet. Those are giant towers, using lots of materials and lots of resources. What if our buildings could act more like these trees? What if we could create in a way that's more sustainable? What if we created by copying the way that ecosystems create. It's when we embed these principles into our design thinking, into the way that we think, that's where we'll start to see real sustainability, where humans are a contribution to their place, and where we can, this planet could hold 10 or 20 billion humans. And these are the life's principles. This is a free resource you can find online. It's like a checklist. So as you're doing your projects, use this checklist. See whether you're actually living up to nature's principles, nature's standards, because if you can, that's where we can start to see 10 to 20 billion humans, or infrastructure that doesn't do harm, that's actually a contribution. And you can see in the middle, the most important principle of nature is that everything in nature, life creates conditions that are conducive to more life. If you leave nature alone, it creates more diversity. If you think of a forest will naturally strive for diversity, and in that diversity, it thrives. If humans left this planet, nature would thrive. Nature would be fine. And this is why I don't agree with this idea that we need to save our planet. We don't need to save our planet. Our planet's going to be fine with or without us. We need to save our own species. And to do that, we need to look at genius that have been here longer than us. We need to look at these elders and learn how to reimagine our own species in the way that we do things. Biomimicry is a very hopeful message because it gives us a roadmap to follow. And what I learned in my PhD is that uncertainty to the ego inspires fear. When we don't know what's coming, often as this quote says, without a map, our ego will inject histories of what it knows in order to avoid the uncertainty. So with climate change, COVID-19, we'll often inject our knowledge from the past, our experience, to try and deal with that uncertainty. But uncertainty to the creative is pure possibility. And if we look to a new model, if we look to nature as a model, and also learn from our histories, learn from what has worked in the past, learn from the elders, the indigenous, if we combine these two worlds, that's where we'll start to see true evolution in the way we do things. The last thing I wanted to say was I wanted to talk about this guy, who's one of my heroes. His name's Ray Anderson, and he was the CEO of one of the world's biggest carpet manufacturing technologies, or carpet companies. And in 1994, one of his employees came up to him and said, "Hey, what's our sustainability strategy?" And he said it was like a spear in the chest moment because he realized he didn't have one. He didn't know how he was going to sustain his company. And at the time, it was the biggest manufacturing or carpet manufacturer in the world. They had incredible revenues. So there's no reason in there from an economic standpoint to change. They were very successful. But he knew in his heart that he had to have sustainability at the forefront of his thinking and of his company. He knew that was the future. And this was in 1994. So at that time, he said he didn't sleep that night. He built one of the most incredible teams of ecological thinkers, ecologists, biologists, sustainable thinkers, the best in the world. And he included Janine Benyus. And they came up with a strategy called Mount Sustainability. And in the early 90s, they had a dream of, by 2020, having their whole carpet manufacturing technology use no carbon or fossil fuels, to be fully circular, to use no toxic chemicals, to reduce all of their waste. And in the 90s, this would have been, like they were talking about carbon neutral before anyone else was. And they set this very, very lofty goal to hit in 25 years. And what's amazing is that they were able to do it before 2020. And in their first year of starting this, they increased revenue by $200 million just by going circular, to figuring out how to reduce waste streams and recycle them. They invented carpet tiles, which revolutionized the carpet industry. So usually carpets would just lay in entire rooms. And so as everyone walked along one path, you'd wear down one section, and then you'd have to rip up the whole carpet. And they're thinking, as they're walking through a forest has this like beautiful entropy. And they thought, what if we make tiles like that, where the tiles could all be mixed and matched based on their pattern on top? But as people walk on one area, it meant that you didn't have to rip up the whole thing. You could just move tiles around and allow them all to be worn down evenly, or just replace the tiles in the middle. So they created a bunch of biomimicry technologies as well as other technologies to transform their company, and to do so by making a lot of money. They showed the economic viability of sustainability. But more than that, they also shifted the whole carpet industry. And so Ray Anderson, who I got to meet, he passed away before 2020, which meant that he didn't get to see his vision come to fruition, but he saw that they were so close. He died right before they could announce it. So he knew that his bold vision was coming to fruition. And why I like this story is that it shows how one person's shift in their mindset can lead to a shift in a whole ecosystem, in a whole industry, and in a whole world. So as we are entering these massive shifts like COVID and climate change, we have an opportunity to shift our thinking, to do something differently, to think from a different way. And in doing so, we could totally shift the way that we think, behave, and create. Dell, the technology company, said by 2020, 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2020 do not exist today. That means we're going to be creating the jobs of the future, that the jobs that exist today may be extinct. They may go out of date. So we're in this amazing shift that's happening. We have this big release and reorganization, which means that all the innovators or any innovators have an opportunity to really build something that's new, that's brilliant, that's sustainable, and that's the future. Now is the time to reinvent. And it all starts with our thinking. It all starts with our thoughts, our assumptions, because our thinking informs our designs. So thank you so much for listening. I know that was a bit of a push, but as you can see, I'm passionate about biomimicry because it's, in the 18 years that I've been focusing on sustainability, it's the most comprehensive model. And if you're interested in bringing it into your own practice or personal or professional lives, I'd invite you to check out biomimicrycommons.com. Here we have online education tools. We have an online course that you can do at your own pace. We have a cohort that you can join. Essentially, I'm giving you everything that I've learned in my 18 years in these courses so that you can bring them to your own practice. Whether you want to start a company, whether you're in a company, whether you want to do it as a part of your thesis, or you just want to find out how to, do it for yourself. Check out Biomimicry Commons, and we have an online course that, for those who are here, I want to offer a 50% discount for the first 10 people that sign up. We have a course launching on Monday, and if you're interested in it, I've just typed in the code Anant50, and the first 10 people, I'm giving 50% off that course. And if you have any problems, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll also give you my email. Anyways, thank you again so much for your patience, for your listening, and for your interest in biomimicry. I hope you're inspired by nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. And we have left some of the links for you for Biomimicry Common as well as Anant Fellowship in the chat box. Do explore our web pages, and as Jane mentioned, we have first 10 people who register for the Inspired by Nature course. There is a 50% discount. So just use the code Anant50 and also explore the opportunity of being a solutionary with Anant University. With that, I think we will end the webinar for all of us. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller, for giving us time and speaking about what you have learned. I think it was a very engaging presentation. I could see it on the chat box also. People were very much engaged and they enjoyed the session. So thank you so much for your time. And thanks, Anant University, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Shraddha, I think we have some Q&A if you would like to address them.
Sure, Shubham. I'll just check. Yeah. you for.
Okay. Sorry. So
Yes.
to the participants, if you're having questions, please, you can send to the chat box so that Shara can handle that session.
Okay, so in one of the questions, we have this question to Dr. Jamie Miller that he's a student from Nigeria, and the question is, why is function important in biomimicry?
Why is function
important in biomimicry?
Yeah, function, it's a great question. Function is the key to doing biomimicry. And what I mean by that is there's two ways. You could go from biology to design, where you take inspiration from a natural organism, like the way the Velcro did. You just look at nature and you abstract ideas that could be applied to, Velcro or to a design. But the key to taking it from one to the other is identifying the function that you see. In the Velcro example, what he saw was that the burr's function was adhesion. He saw how it could adhere to hair. And he thought, well, where could we create adhesion? And he just created a new adhesive. Now, the other way to do biomimicry is from design to biology, which is where you have a design challenge. Say it's like, well, in India, for example, our design challenge was how do we cool a building? And again, that middle link is you identify the function you want to do. What do you want your design to do? I want my building to cool. And so then you take that function and look to the natural world and say, well, how does nature cool? And that's where we looked at barrel cactus, we looked at elephant skin, we looked at termite mounds. So function is the interlink between biology and design and biology. So it's about understanding what the function is that you want to achieve. And that's how you easily bridge those two worlds. So a very sophisticated question, a great question. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jamie. And I think I do not have any other questions in the chat box, but there are a couple of comments. So someone from Nigeria says that this session was too short and they want a series of webinars. I would recommend you explore our Inspired by Nature page. And I think there is a series of courses there, and it will be a very interactive session where Dr. Miller has a lot of learning experience. And I say this with being a part of that. I have been given this opportunity by Anant University, where I embarked on a live action project with Dr. Miller. So it's a very engaging experience. You should definitely go and explore that.
Shraddha, there is one more question in the chat box. Can you just read it?
In the chat box. Okay, there is a question which says, can a geographer pursue a course, or does it require only a science background?
A great question. No, you do not need a science background. The course is designed specifically for any background. We've had dancers, we've had artists, we've had economists, we've had high school students, we've had professionals, universities, PhDs. We've had farmers. It doesn't matter where you come from. And in fact, that's the key to biomimicry, is that we need diversity of thinking. We need all people to be working together. I've written about this, that I think the biggest barrier to biomimicry is creativity. And creativity comes from the commons. That's why we call it the biomimicry commons. We need all of these diverse thinkers to come together. You don't need to have a biology degree, and you don't need to be in engineering or design. You can apply it to anything.
Just for reiterating purpose, the code is Anant50. One of the attendees asked for the code, so it's Anant50, and I have put that in the chat box as well. So I think we are bang on time. It's 7:30. Do we have any question, any last question before we close this session? I do not see any questions. Hello.
That's my son, Oscar. He's the one distracting me, but.
So with that, I think, Dr. Miller, we can end the session, and we would look forward to hear back from everyone. You have the email address. Dr. Miller has put it there in the chat box. You also have our web links, so you can register there and subscribe to our newsletters, as well as connect with us to learn more on biomimicry, as well as being a solutionary at Anant University by being an Anant Fellow. Thank you so much. everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. James Miller. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.